Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scale Smarter, Automate Sales Tax to Grow Your CAS Practice. This webcast is brought to you by CPA Practice Advisor and Avalara. I'm Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, I'd like to explain how CPE works. The webcast qualifies for 1 credit of continuing professional education. If you plan to earn CPE for attending this session, you must stay with us for at least 50 minutes. In addition, we will display 4 polling questions during the webcast. You'll need to record an answer for at least 3 of the questions, as this is our verification that you are still watching. Later today, you'll receive an email from CPA Practice Advisor that contains a link to your CPE certificate, assuming you meet the requirements for CPE. Please note that we can give CPE credit for multiple people watching on the same computer. So if there are others in your office who would like to attend this event at the same computer, please have them join you now. And at the end of the event, we'll provide an opportunity for you to send us their email addresses and names so that they too can receive CPE credit. At any time, you can enter any questions you might have in the Ask a Question box provided on your screen, and our speakers will try to get to as many questions as possible during the presentation. Questions not answered during this live webinar will be addressed by the speakers afterwards through email. The slides for this presentation are available for download if you click the Event Resources option at the bottom left side of your screen, and then click on the PDF file. You can download the slides. Today, we are joined by John Solis, Director of Strategic Accountant Solutions and Partnerships at Avalara, and Sona Ekmakjian, Global Head of Strategic Accounting Partnerships at Avalara. And now we are ready to begin.
Thank you, Gail. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to be here today. Just a little bit about myself. I'm Sona Ekmakjian. As Gail said, I'm the Global Head of Strategic Accounting Partnerships at Avalara. What does that mean? I drive our strategy and how we go to market with the accounting profession. And I am a CPA. I've been in the sales and use tax capacity for over 35 years, and I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today. John.
Hi, thank you, Sona. And my name's John Solis. I too have been doing taxes for a number of years, a little over 30 years now. And I've been focused mostly on either tax practice, tax processing, or certainly tax automation for most of that period of time. I'm here to kind of walk through this presentation with you and talk about the wonderful ways we can help automate your tax processes.
Thank you, John. So over the next 50 minutes to an hour, we're going to talk about why is CAS important. Certainly, we hear about CAS everywhere. What are some of the key trends? The combination of people, process, technology. John is going to take us through a phenomenal demo of MRA, Managed Returns for Accountants, which a lot of CAS firms use. And how do you partner with Avalara, and how do we typically work with them? So with that, I think we're going to move to our first polling question.
Okay, this is our first polling question, first of 4. The question is, how are you doing sales tax compliance today? And the options are manually, using a tax compliance software, referring to another service provider, or I'm not offering this service. So pick the option that is most closely aligned with your practice. And if at any time you have any problems answering the question on the device you're using, you can post your answer in the Ask a Question box and we'll record it there.
Awesome. I always like to ask this question because it sort of gives you a really good understanding of how people are currently managing their practice, even if they're actually even managing sales and use taxes within their practice.
Let's just understand a little bit more about the audience. So we appreciate everyone responding.
And it helps them get CPE credits too, right?
I'm a CPA. I know how important that is. Every credit counts. And I will be asking for mine as well, Gail.
All right.
Awesome. I think.
We'll leave this up for just another moment.
Sure. I was about to ask you if I should hit next yet or not.
Okay, while we wait for just another moment for answers on this, I also want to mention that as I said before, if you have any questions for our speakers, you can post those in the Ask a Question box. And if you're expecting an answer delivered directly to you, you'll see that by clicking the Total Answered Questions option that's also in that box. Okay, so it looks like the majority of people, almost half, are doing sales taxes manually.
Oh, great.
It does not surprise me. Does that surprise you?
No, lots of opportunity for process automation here is what I'm hearing, but awesome.
Yes, yes. So let's get started. Ready, John? So why is CAS important, right? You know, reality is a lot of firms are doing sales tax compliance today or providing these outsourced accounting services, but it was called something else, right? It was outsourced accounting services. It wasn't called CAS, but there's been a lot of focus in this area, and CAS has been disrupting the marketplace. And there's a lot of interest in client accounting services. And you can no longer call CAS just bookkeeping. Your clients are asking for more, and there's a lot more being asked of you, and CAS is expanding in a lot of different areas. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, John. I mean, you know, this disruption brings opportunity, and opportunity brings revenue to your practices. So it's actually a great thing.
Yeah, I just look at it as just a good reason to be able to expand the services that you're offering.
Exactly. And let's talk a little bit more about the disruption and some of the key drivers driving this growth. And I like to say growth, but what I really mean is efficient growth. You need to grow efficiently. Growing just alone is not enough. But there's a lot of client demands coming at accounting firms. And really what's driving that client demand, in my opinion, is two things. One is the complexity associated with a lot of these services that are being asked, and certainly in the sales and use tax space, and resource limitation. We're all reading about how the accounting profession is kind of shrinking. Not a lot of people are going into it. So the combination of those two things is driving a lot of the demand. But also it's accounting firms having more data. The power of data is really phenomenal, because it gives you not only the visibility, but it gives you now can do a lot of analytics with that data and help your clients get to the future. Data alone is not as powerful as the analysis, the trends you learn from that data, and what you can do with it. And finally, the tech stack. Oh, go ahead, John.
Oh, no, I was just about to say, valid point. We're going to be talking a lot about the power of data, not just the fact that you have the data, but can you do something with it, and how easy can you move it between different systems?
Exactly. And the tech stack is really the technology you're using in your CAS practice is really important. And it's not just the technology, it's the integration of those technologies. And John's going to spend some time later talking about that. Let's talk a little bit more about what your clients are looking for. What they're really looking for is client-centric services, and some of this may be very intuitive to all of us, but they're looking for personalization. And this, John, can be really contradicting, because a CAS practice is all about standardization, delivering in the cookie cutter format, but you need to make sure you're really meeting the personal needs of your clients based on their industry, their footprint, and the services they need. I think responsiveness and communication is a no-brainer. Any client would be looking for those qualities, and it's really important in your interaction with your clients. But what really, in my opinion, the most important thing is the value driven. It's no longer doing compliance or offering these accounting services alone is not enough. What your clients are looking for is that value you're delivering. How are you meeting their personal objectives for their business? And that's where a lot of the advisory services come into play. And there's a lot of hype around advisory services in the market, and your clients are looking for that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I always go into on those values. It's like we always talk about, filing the tax return. And, ultimately, is there value in looking at a tax amount and making sure it goes on the right line, right part of the tax return, and goes to the state locally? Is there value? Is that the value? Or is the value recognizing when they need to register in another jurisdiction, when they need to start filing in new locations, if they have past experiences they need to correct because they did something wrong? That's kind of where I view the value in this process.
Yeah, it's a very valid point. I'll give you a personal experience. Yes, I'm a CPA, and yes, I do have a CPA for my personal taxes. It's not necessarily considered bookkeeping services, but I'm frustrated with my CPA. And by the way, I can say this because I know he's not online. Hopefully, he doesn't listen to this recording at some point in the future. But he's great at what he does, which is he takes my data and, as you said, John, just puts it on the tax return and files. I have questions throughout the year. I call him. It's very reactive. But I'm looking for more. I'm looking for someone that's going to give me advice on what I could do differently, some ideas about where I can invest my money. That's the value that I'm looking for, and that's the value your clients are looking for. And if you're really doing the continuous improvement, I think your clients would tell you that the value is what they're looking for.
Awesome.
Your CAS practice, there's traditionally a lot of services that firms have offered: accounting, payroll, bill payment, expense management, the traditional tax services. But what is really changed is some of the emerging services that are now being offered around HR, reporting, budgeting, forecasting, and financial planning. And one of the areas that is on there is SALT, which is state and local tax, or sales and use tax compliance services, which is the one of the new areas, and one that we at Avalara are very focused on because that's kind of our bread and butter. So we're going to pivot a little bit the rest of the presentation and focus more on the sales tax compliance area. But CAS overall is the fastest growing area in a lot of firms. So it's because of these emerging services. It's about the demands that is driving this.
And kind of to bring a lot of the concepts together that Sona and I have been talking about is the technology stack. We're actually going to be talking a lot about this here in the next couple of slides. We tried to use the example here of QuickBooks. A lot of accounting firms use QuickBooks for their bookkeeping, but would you view a QuickBooks bookkeeper as an expert in payroll processing? No, they probably have an outsourced payroll provider that they use. Well, QuickBooks works very tightly with ADP. So a lot of ADP or payroll requirements can be automated through QuickBooks using ADP payroll processing. You want to make sure you pick technology stacks that work together well so that you're basically making efficient use of your time. You're not spending, and I keep going back to data, you're not spending a lot of time moving data between different processes in order to manage it. It also ties into how you handle your sales and use taxes. You want to use something with whatever your accounting system is so that when you're billing, you're not having to look up tax rates manually. You're not having to move data around and file returns manually. You want a process where you can have visibility to the taxes, be able to reconcile it, and be able to file it to the state without having to do a lot of data manipulation. To that point, I'm going to break here a little bit, Sona. I see a question came in, and one of the questions that came in kind of related to this topic was, our company provides real property services across 35 states. Does Avalara have software with state rules built into it that identify and define the taxable categories for sales tax, specifically contract type, labor, materials, etc.? What they're asking is, during a billing process, if you're billing something, can you bill and identify if a product or service is taxable when you're billing your client? And we absolutely have rules in the system that handle that. We actually have rules in the system that handle that from a sales tax point of view when you're billing. And we also have rules in the system that can handle taxes from a self-assessment point of view when you're buying those materials to deliver some of those services, if you need to be self-assessing that stuff correctly. That's definitely some standard rules and content we have in the system.
Yes. The other thing, John, I think it's worth noting is, we talk about the importance of a tech stack and the importance of a CAS practice committing to a technology stack and staying with it. But reality is a little bit different than what we're putting on a slide here. Reality is, you're going to have someone come to you and says, I don't use QuickBooks, or I don't want to use ADP.
Right.
And an accounting firm at that point is faced with a decision. Do you adopt new technology in your tech stack because you don't want to lose the account? Or do you just say, I'm sorry, you need to be on my tech stack if you want me to provide these services? And I know you started a CAS practice in your previous life. How do you handle that?
That's a really good question. And so we do workshops, or Avalara, I should say in general, does workshops with a lot of firms on how to manage taxes with inside of their CAS practice. And this question comes up a lot. And it typically comes up like this. It's like, hey, you know what, we've decided we're using QuickBooks, and we just had a client that came to us and said, hey, you know what, we don't want you to use QuickBooks, we want you to use Intact, for example, to manage, Sage Intact to manage our books. You got to take a step back when that happens, right? Because we just talked about, if you have a CAS practice, usually trying to standardize on a certain set of technology in order to be able to deliver your services in a value-added, profitable way, right? Now, if you have to hire people or train people on how another accounting system works, how that other accounting system fits into your tech stack, how you're going to manage that, who's going to be the primary people managing it, who your people that kind of fall back or your backup folks in order when the other people are out, like, how's that going to look? I mean, does that make sense for you to take on that client? Now, you might say yes. That you might say yes. Typically, though, you might want to reconsider: is it worth your time? Unless they really want to pay for it, like, is it worth your time to bring in a whole other set of technology to meet one client's demand? Or do you want to think through that a little more and say, hey, you know what, maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe I want to refer this client to somebody else.
Yeah, it's not just bringing in the technology, it's the resources you need to train on that technology as well. And I think as accountants, we don't like to say no, but sometimes if you really want to drive an efficient practice and efficient growth, it's okay to say no.
Yes. Saying that here, just to go into this key trends section here for just a few minutes. It says, what are we hearing from firms? I just mentioned that we do a lot of, Sona and I do a lot of seminars, workshops with a lot of different firms. And like, what do we hear when we're at those seminars? Typically we hear, we're providing sales, and this is actually, again, all around sales and use taxes when we have this discussion. But what are we seeing? And to the conversation we were just having before, we generally find out a lot of firms are providing sales tax services, but they're not proactively marketing it or reaching out to their clients for it. They're doing them as one-offs. The clients come to them, they got a notice from the state or something like that, and it's, hey, can you handle this? Can you do this as a one-off service for us? That is certainly one way to handle it, but do you have the expertise in-house to manage that? That's the question you have to ask, right? We haven't standardized that product or service offering. What we're saying there is, like, I don't have a product or service offering that's been standardized on how I'm filing returns or how I'm registering my client for the different returns. The other thing we commonly hear is we haven't figured out how to deliver the service profitably. That's actually one of the larger issues I hear from a lot of firms, because can anyone filing a sales tax return is not that difficult, right? You log on to the state website and you type the information in. But when you start blowing it out to like 30, like the question we just got in said they were in 35 states. If you're in 35 states, do you think all the states have the same requirements for how you get the login, how you log in, when you log in, what information do you enter in there? Their notices might be delivered through that login. For issues, they might be mailing them directly to the client. Like, there's no standardized way of thinking through that. And so you want to try to see, like, do you have those resources to standardize and organize that in a correct way? You can't be experts at everything. And so there's always concern about what kind of expertise do you have in the firm versus the type of liability that you're dealing with. The key takeaway I want, go ahead.
I was just going to add two more things, observations that I've heard from firms as well. Been in public accounting for a long time, and compliance was always known as the low margin, high risk business. And it does with the advancement of technology and standardization. It is a very profitable segment in a lot of accounting firms. So there is a way to make this profitable. The other point I wanted to make is for, what I see in a lot of firms when they're doing it manually, they're also doing it in different places in the organization. So the solid practice may be doing it, the outsourced services may be doing it. It's just not only manual, but it's decentralized as well. And that's what really puts, I think, a lot of firms at risk. We talked about, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Hey, I just pull in this slide up real quick. We were talking about CAS services in the lead. We just wanted to pull some trends here as we're talking about sales and use taxes. But, out of the percentage of top 100 firms reporting growth in the CAS service area, and yes, there are statistics on that, you'll notice there's the SALT practice area there. 76% are actively growing that practice within inside of their CAS service. Now, they're not actively growing it because they want to. They're actively growing it because their clients are pulling them into it. Clients recognize, same like payroll, they don't want to be filing that payroll tax return. They don't want to be updating the rates for payroll. They want somebody else to do it. They want the same thing for the CAS practice and the SALT services.
Yeah. So if you're a firm that's not offering sales tax compliance, there's really two areas, both CAS and SALT. So it's definitely firms are seeing the value and offering more and more.
With that, we're going to go to polling question number 2.
Okay, everybody, this is your second polling question. Are you currently doing any sales and use tax research on product taxability for your clients? And the answer options are yes, no, or not applicable. So pick the answer that is most closely aligned with your practice, and then click submit.
I love this particular question, Sona, because we were just talking about tax returns, right? And so it always comes up, right? So you're filing a tax return in one state, and you're selling, I'm just going to say you're selling a protein bar, maybe. You're selling it in one state. You probably know if that state should be taxing those particular items that you're selling. But when you start shipping those products across the US, what's the logical question your client's going to start asking you, right? When you have to start registering and filing in other states for them, they're going to want to know how to tax that particular item. And and for all you don't know, protein bars are sort of like between like a candy bar and like a health food item. And so a lot of states have like really specific rules on like what qualifies as health food versus what qualifies as candy.
To go dive into the ingredients, I mean, it's highly complicated.
I remember one of my first audits, I was years ago when I was working for a firm. They were getting audited by the state of Illinois, and I ended up going out to the grocery store and buying a whole bunch. This is before the internet was popular. I ended up buying a bunch of protein bars, and I literally sat down and had to read the ingredient lists in order to figure out if they should be taxable or not.
Oh my God.
It was one of my more exciting audits I managed.
Well, I did that on the auditor side because I audited at the companies at the state of California, and it's no different. You walk into a taxpayer's facility and start looking at ingredients. Healthcare is highly complicated in California as well, so it's less than desirable. Let's put it that way.
So you're the person I learned to hate. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. And
Got
I
it.
saw the
Got it.
light at the end of the tunnel. That's why I went into advisory. You know, I wanted to be the nice person. I'm like, this is horrible. I can help companies.
Wow. All right, we're looking at almost half are saying no, they are not doing research at the moment. About a third are.
Okay, awesome. Good information. Going to the next slide, Sona.
I think, John, we can spend hours talking about this slide. When you think about CAS and you think about sales tax compliance, adding it, you have to look at these three pieces: people, process, and technology. And all three of these are intertwined and moving on a real-time basis. So let's talk about each of these. When you talk about people, it's really who's doing the stuff you need them to do, whether it's payroll or sales tax compliance here. You know, you look at your people, we know there's shortage of talent. You know that you're doing things manually today. There's the technology and AI. You know, one thing I do want to focus around the people is the type of talent you're hiring. To do sales tax compliance, you don't need sales tax experts. The example John was talking about, you know, protein bars, we read the labels. There's technology out there that can make you an expert and can help you be a better advisor. So what we're seeing is a lot of accounting firms are not hiring CPAs. They're hiring data analysts, they're hiring technology people, they're hiring business majors and training them on what they need to do. There's this perception out there that you need deep tax experts to grow this practice, and that's really not necessarily the case. Now let's pivot a little bit about the process. I think the process is really important and it overlaps with technology and the people. You want to streamline your processes. You want to standardize your process, and you want to automate your process, because nobody wants to do those mundane tasks. You know, there's a lot of discussion around out there about AI taking over what we're doing. Yeah, AI is taking over tasks that our people don't want to do. Nobody wants to do those repetitive tasks. So why not bring in those automation to standardize and automate those mundane repetitive tasks so we can focus on the value added tasks as well. And on the technology, go ahead.
No, I was just about to say, and on the technology side, you see how all those bubbles are overlapping. And the reason why we're doing it is the technology by itself isn't going to help you. If you're just looking at technology standalone, if you're looking at processes standalone, if you're looking at people standalone, they're not going to help you. You have to be able to make them work together, which is why we're talking about the technology stack. It's why we're looking at like how you build those standard processes around the technology and around the people that you hire that are going to help you be able to automate and offer a service that is scalable and something that you can maintain going forward.
Really successful CAS practices, in my opinion, are the ones that figured out how to innovate, scale, and automate. And that is the winning combination. And John,
exactly.
you started a CAS practice. Was this kind of the formula you used?
Oh, it's exactly. You walk into the I'm just going to say the company. You walk into the company, and you look at the firm, I should say. You walk into the firm, and you're like, everyone's doing sales taxes, right? We were just talking about that, right? All the accounting firms are doing sales taxes in some capacity, but they're usually just throwing people at it, right? They're throwing people at it, and they're just basically managing it on spreadsheets, and they're sort of doing a manual process. And can you do it that way? Absolutely. If you want to throw a bunch of people at it, you can certainly manage it. But in order to build a process and automate it, you have to look at how you're doing it. You have to put processes in place. You have to standardize those processes, train the people, and make it work with the technology, or that little synergy you're trying to build, or those repetitive standard processes to basically offer a profitable service, can be a bit of a challenge. Let's say Sona and I could get on our soapbox probably and talk about this for a long time, because this comes up, for me anyways, this comes up on a monthly basis. And it typically comes up with, hey, my client, they give me this report every month, and it's this PDF file, for example. They give me this PDF file, and this is what they give me, and I use this to file all my returns, and I basically take that information, I make 3 spreadsheets out of it, and I log into 30 states and I file the returns. Probably a better way you could probably do that, right?
A little bit, yes, absolutely. But this is a great analogy, and John and I were trying to come up with something. It's really traditional hosting versus cloud hosting. I think a lot of people in the audience have been dealing with this. Cloud computing kind of revolutionized the tech industry, right? Remember, traditional hosting, there's a big investment, there's training, a significant cost, and then everyone started adopting cloud hosting. And that was scalable. It was easier uptime. There was no maintenance involved. And we see the same thing with CAS practices. CAS practices are shifting from this reactive manual environment to more of a process-driven, automated, innovative environment.
Yeah. We got 2 questions that came in here which kind of relate around the topic that we're talking about right now. And one of them is like, New York has many small businesses, for most of them required to file annually. So what we're saying there is they're not a huge company, they have a low tax liability, so New York is just saying, hey, I just want you to file the return once a year. The question goes on to say, most of the time sales data are readily available and we need to use a lot of judgment for our taxable sales figures, and takes time and effort. How can we mitigate the ease and work through the automation? I deal a lot with this, and this would require probably a side conversation, but typically when you're dealing with billing, you're trying, and you want to standardize and automate with the process, you have to standardize the types of products and services that you're selling, right? The stuff that shows up on the invoice, right? You need to have clear definitions on what those items are. You need to be able to tag them with what we call a tax rule or a tax categorization of some kind. And like, if you have a standardized offering that you can categorize correctly, you can usually figure out if it should be taxed or not. And that Avalara has rules sort of around that. I mentioned the protein bars earlier. We've had some conversations around, the question we had before was around types of services, around maintenance and other types of things. A lot of that relies on standardizing how you're billing those items, what the bill is going to look like, what you're going to say, standard items that you can select from to bill, and then how you're going to map that over to tax rules. If you can't build that standardization between the two, then it's very difficult to sort of build a process and automate that. The construction industry is the classic example here, because I think we got some questions on that before. It's hard to tell when you're doing a construction project how you want to standardize, like, is it real property, is it tangible property? There are lots of questions that come up, and then we're always trying to figure out the best way to standardize.
There's actually a second part to that question that says, I'm trying to determine if standard practice is to hire outside consultants to identify the taxable billable service categories by state, or can I rely on Avalara software for that?
Oh,
so,
I missed that. Sorry. No worries. I missed that one.
For you.
Yeah, sure. You can so Avalara certainly does have standard classifications or categorizations for different types of products and service offerings. So Avalara certainly has that information that you can utilize if you want to utilize it. Additionally, though, if you're a tax practitioner and you're looking to do research, Avalara also offers a separate research product if you want, which is kind of like a deeper dive into the tax research. and I'm kind of making some assumptions here that the audience understands the difference between doing product mapping to our tax rules and maybe a separate research exercise you might want to do for a client to figure out what categories and rules they should be using. We offer a couple of products to help with that, but you can certainly utilize those if you want to do deeper research and be able to bring back the state site or rules that the state's using for particular product classifications for your clients.
And that research tool John is referencing, a lot of our CAS practices use it because there's such a big lift in advisory. It's a great tool for them to be a good advisor to their clients and address some of these technical questions without being a tax expert. All right. Gail, next question.
Polling question number 3.
All right. Do you offer any type of registration services for sales and use tax filings? And your answer options are yes, no, or not applicable. So pick the one that most applies to you. And again, if you have any trouble answering the question online, you can always post your answer in the Ask a Question box on your screen, and we'll record it there.
This is another hot one that comes up a lot. And usually it comes up like, hey, I realized I should have registered in the state of X, like whatever, 3 years ago. Can you help me? Can you help me with that, right? That, and you certainly can.
Franks, it's cold calling. Client office visits appropriate.
You're coming in and out.
It?
Whoops, hit me with that again, Sonny. You're I don't know if it's just me, but you're coming in and out.
Oh, I'm sorry. What are some good ways to advertise CAS services within a firm? Is cold calling or office visits appropriate?
Man, I used to.
I'll start. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I always looked at the existing clients we're doing work for and just finding out what they're doing and how they're doing it. You'd be surprised how often you find out they're crossing state lines for various reasons to do stuff. Is what I usually would usually happen.
Yeah, I think that low-hanging fruit is exactly that within firms. You can certainly do marketing, webinars on platforms, send mailers, visits, cold calls. All of that is an excellent option, and firms do that. But the low-hanging fruit is what John, you exactly mentioned, is your firm has a pool of clients. You have a book of business, and cross-selling to an existing client is a lot easier than bringing in a new client. So I would say start there.
Did we stall enough, Gail?
We did. Very good. So the answers are exactly even. Yes and no, half and half.
Okay. Again, it's one of those service offerings that no one likes registering, but it's always something that comes up when you're working with clients.
And it's a prerequisite to filing, right? If you're growing your sales tax, you have to register your clients if they're meeting the threshold so you can file them.
Wow. I wanted to show this little example here before we actually went in and did a demo of the software. But this is an example of sales tax return in a sales tax return and filing process. So these are the, generically speaking, these are the steps that most clients as well as firms would go through when they're actually filing a tax return. And I just wanted to break it down a little bit for you. When you think through this, if you're filing a return on behalf of your clients, the first thing the firm's going to do, the client, I should say, the first thing the client's going to do is they're going to come to you and they're going to tell you what returns they need to file each month, right? Or the ones they're currently filing, right? And that's all managed when we call it the calendar setup. That's when they tell you, hey, these are the returns I file each month, each quarter, annually. That's when you set the system up. It's a one-time setup exercise where hey, these are the returns I need to worry about on a regular basis. After that is set up, there's a process that we can set up around how we get that data into the system so that we actually can file the returns. Now, if you have a client using Avalara, so maybe they're using Avatax with, I almost said Great Plains. I almost dated myself, Sona. But if you have a client using Avatax with, say, QuickBooks or Intact or any other accounting system, and you're using Avalara to calculate the taxes, the data is already there, right? You can grab that data and automatically generate returns with that if you wanted to. But if you don't have that data, or maybe your client's not using Avatax, they can simply give you a spreadsheet and you can import that information in. But however you get it, you need to get the tax data into the system. You need to reconcile that. You need to have a standard process on how you do the data reconciliation back to their general ledger. Give the opportunity for the client to make adjustments or to review and approve the data. We have some simple reports. I'm going to show you what those look like in a second. But ultimately, you want to approve the liability. Once you've approved the liability, do you really want to have to remember all the logins for all the websites, how the returns need to get filed? Most firms don't, which is why we offer this particular service. You'll notice we have that box in orange on the screen. That's when you pass it over to Avalara. Once those returns have been approved, Avalara's filing machine takes over. We file a little over 500,000 returns a month. But in that process, we will actually take that information in, we'll prep those returns, we will file and pay those returns, and then we'll also handle those follow-up notices that may or may not happen during the filing process and get back to your clients. It's a nice way to help automate the process.
So basically, you're taking a 7-step process, 6 steps every month, and reducing it to 3 steps, possibly 2 if the data is coming from Avatax. So this is where a lot of CAS practices can add sales tax compliance to their offerings with minimal resource requirements, because you're not doing the heavy lifting. Avalara is. We're doing the prep, the filing, the remittance, the notice management, which is the bigger lift, while you have visibility to what we're doing.
Exactly. You don't have to have people hanging around helping to file. All you need to do is what you're probably used to doing, right? You need to reconcile those liabilities and make sure those amounts make sense. As long as that's all in place, just need to get those approval from your client, and then Avalara takes over from there.
Take us to the demo, John.
Hey, it's all good. I'm going to show you a demo now. And so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to hit back over here. I'm going to share my screen. And let me know when you can see it, Sona.
I can see it. And this is not intended to be a full-blown demo. It's just kind of for you guys to get a feel for what it looks like, the product on a firm level.
You got it. So I'm in what we call Avalara's returns console. And this is the system that we utilize. Actually, Avalara uses it internally to file all of their tax returns for all of our customers that ask us to. And we actually offer that same product externally to firms. And this particular version of it we're using, it's called Avalara's Managed Returns for Accountants. In here, when you first log in, and I'm hoping I didn't time out yet, but in here, this is where you can see the main dashboard. Now, I've got it set up really specifically for what I want to show you, but this is where you can actually see all the returns that your clients want you to file. You have it all centralized in one spot. And in here, you can see all the returns. You can see the status of those returns. Now, I have 3 months pulled up because I wanted to show you the differences in statuses. But, I've got three months, and I've got January, February, and March. I'm a little behind. I'm showing 2024. But I've got 3 months in here. And then from here, you'll notice the status on these returns for my Georgia and Florida return. You'll notice, hey, they're in the filed status. I've already taken care of that. But it looks like I've approved some returns for filing here. So that's just another status. And then I've got these other returns here, which I haven't even approved yet. Now, typically, again, I'm showing this for demo purposes, but typically you would be, if you were doing March returns, you would be logging in here probably the 1st through the 10th of April right? The month of April, you'd be reviewing data and approving this information for filing. If you wanted to go in here and see what the tax returns actually look like, if this return is in a filed status here, you can actually see what the PDF copy of the return looks like. If I'm in a demo system, but if I actually clicked on this other link here, you'd actually see the return that was filed. We always give you a copy of the return generated in-house and then the return that's filed with the state, because most returns we don't file a PDF, we usually file a data feed. And so we keep them both in the system separately. And again, I got even if your return is what we call in this pending approval, even if you haven't approved it, you can still actually see a copy of what the return is that's going to be filed. But all of that's managed here in the dashboard, and you'll notice I've got a series of filters running down the side here, so that let's say I've got again, if they're using Avalara, you can actually attach to their Avalara Avatax account directly here, so that you don't have to import data. There's a way to pull up one account or multiple accounts at once from an Avalara perspective of all their Avalara accounts with their data in it. If they're not using Avalara's Avatax system for calculating taxes, you can actually import spreadsheets. That's all managed here as well. This is where you can go in and see the filing calendars that are set up for each particular client. If I go in here and remove my filters, this is where you can see all of the tax returns that are being filed. All the screens here have this flexible grid, so you can basically move things around depending on what you're trying to do in the system and make it user-friendly to yourself. You can obviously create custom views and save it. And you can also add filtering methods so that you can actually look at very specific things, maybe for what one particular accountant or staff person's responsible for, or what everyone's responsible for in the system. All that's managed here. Now, let's say, for example, though, I actually have it pulled up here in another tab, but let's say you wanted to add some additional value to your client. Now, we're talking about returns filing, and I mentioned earlier, like, there's one set of value associated with making sure that, you know, if they calculated $1,000 in Massachusetts, you filed $1,000 in Massachusetts, right? But like, there's a very limited value, I view, associated with that. A better value would be using some of the tools we have in our system here to say, hey, look, I've got an economic nexus heat map. And a lot of you on the phone probably know what that means. And what that means is Avalara is tracking the sales that you're sending to different states, and we're letting you, the firm, know that maybe you're approaching some registration thresholds in different states. You'll notice these are all green, and that means that, you know what, these are states that this particular client is registered and filing in. But, you know, maybe they're in a situation where they're not registered and they're approaching a registration threshold. That's when you see the color will change over to yellow, meaning, hey, you might want to talk to the client and ask about registering. Speaking of registering, again, Avalara does offer services around this. If you're not comfortable with registering, you can actually outsource that to Avalara. Avalara will actually give you an online questionnaire that either you or the client can fill out, and then get that information filled out, and then Avalara can go off, register, and get you the registration numbers in the states as applicable. Additionally, you can go in here and you can also run reports. Now, there's various reports you can run in the system. There's transaction reports, liability reports, there's all sorts of reports you can run, but I'm running low on time here. I did run a report ahead of time. And so this is a report, it's called a liability report in our system. The main focus of this particular report is usually given to a client, but it's consolidating all of the tax data that was calculated in a particular month and comparing it to what's actually due. So if I look at this and I'm saying, hey, I can go in here, I can see that, hey, you know what? I've got some seller's use liability of $483, but you know what? What's actually due, if I scroll all the way over here, what's actually due, now I'm in the demo system, but what's actually due is $348, right? Going back up, you'll notice I've got some areas highlighted in yellow. That's just letting me know that, hey, looks like we're calculating taxes in states and there's no registration number. You'd be surprised how often this happens. Clients just start charging taxes in different states, don't actually have registration numbers, and they're not actually filing the taxes. Again, good way to do some analysis, take a look at this information and let them know that, hey, maybe we need to start thinking about how we register and file in a particular state. I'm going to go back, Sona, to the PowerPoint deck.
Yeah, I think
And
it's important to note like the journey, sales tax journey that your clients go through. It's really starts with sales tax risk assessment, which measures where should they register. Sometimes they'll do things like voluntary disclosure if there's been liability that they've collected and haven't remitted, to John's point. Then there's the registration. Then there's the calculation, which is our AvaTax product. There's the filing as well, which is MRA that we show. So it's really the journey that a client goes through. All right, we're back to slides. I want to talk a little bit about Avalara's, how we go to market with accountants. We have an accountant partner program, and we really work with the accountant profession in 3 ways. Referral, which is your client has a technology need, you refer them to us, and we sell them, or they subscribe to our services. Implement, where we have a training program where we train our accountants on how to implement the Avalara solution. So they not only refer, but they implement it on our behalf. And this becomes a big revenue stream to a lot of firms. And then the tools, which is we bring a suite of solutions to the accounting profession for them to use to offer services. So these are the 3 fundamental ways we go to market. Want to drill down on the tools on the next slide real quick.
Can I just add, Sona, we got a lot of questions about how to tax certain things and can use Avalara content correctly. A lot of that is referred to on the implement side. If you, the accounting firm, are responsible for the implementation, making sure they standardize, build that process, then you're helping yourself to be able to use the tools that we're about to talk to now.
Excellent. So our tools portfolio is extensive, but the 3 solutions or tools that a lot of CAS practices use is managed returns for accountants. It's a research platform, especially when it comes to advising clients on taxability and nexus, and also our 1099 W-9 solution. So a lot of the CAS practices subscribe to these 3 solutions. Outside of that, we do have a license management. If you can click real quick, property tax as well. This is a continuing portfolio of solutions, so we have plans of adding more, but this is it for now.
Thank you, Sona.
With that, next polling question.
Okay, this is our 4th and final polling question, and it is, would you like to learn more about how Avalara can support your firm's tax compliance and client service offerings? And the options are either yes or no. I think you guys can go ahead and continue while people are answering that.
Fantastic. So if you have any questions or you'd like to talk to us about some of the information we discussed today, you'd like to see more about our tools or our accountant program, here's how you can reach us. So this is our contact information. Real quick on Q&A, we'll get started. Maybe we have time for a couple questions. John, I have a customer who has not filed taxes for 14 months and is not registered but collected. How can I help them?
That's tying in right to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
I got that question, having done it, got that question quite a bit. It's like you get the client that comes to you and is like, hey, you know what? They know, right? They know they've been doing it wrong. They either were calculating taxes or not calculating taxes, but they've got a problem and they know they need to fix it. Typically, me personally, I used to take in the managed returns for accountants solution I just showed you. I mean, I just showed you the returns filing piece of it, but if they know they're out of compliance, they can actually give you their data. You can read it into the system. We'll actually calculate what the liability is by month for you. We can set it up on a set of returns. We can do the amended returns. We can help with the registration. But that's the easy part. It's managing the expectations of the client through the process, right? It's how do you talk to the client and explain to them that, you know what, there's probably going to be a voluntary disclosure you might need to do. There might be some interest you might be responsible for, but it's going through with the client, setting the expectation, and then using the service offerings that we have in order to calculate and help file that liability. But that's definitely something we can help with.
Yeah. And another question might be our final question is, how do firms typically price the sales tax piece?
On the sales tax piece, it's specific to returns, I'll assume. For the tax return side of things, it's usually well, there's a couple of ways they do it. What I've been seeing lately for the last couple of years is they usually charge a monthly technology fee, whatever that is, $500, $1,000, depending on what you're putting in that technology fee. But there's usually a technology fee, so a monthly standard charge. And because the tax return number can fluctuate each month, most firms want to charge by return in that case. So they'll have like a flat fee each month for the technology, and they might have like, I don't know, $50, $60 a month for the actual tax return filing. Everyone asks me what people typically charge for a tax return. And I mean, I've seen prices as low as $40, and I've seen as high as $300 a month, right? It kind of depends what the client's asking you to do, right? And it goes back to creating those standard processes, but typically it's around the 50, 60 mark, I see.
Thank you. And I think with that, we're out of time. It has been a blast. Thank you, John.
Hey,
And
thank you, Sona.
Gail, back to you.
All right, thank you both, John and Sona, for an excellent presentation. We hope you all enjoyed this webinar, and we want to thank all of you for sharing your time with us today. We want to thank Avalara for making this event possible and enabling us to offer a free CPE credit to each attendee. And speaking of CPE credits, as a reminder, you will receive a link to your CPE certificate later today in your email. So look for a message from CPA Practice Advisor this afternoon. If you have any questions about CPE, you can contact me directly at gperry, Gperry, at cpapracticeadvisor.com. Also, if others are watching this event with you at the same computer, and if they require CPE credit, you can email me their names and email addresses. Again, that's gperry at cpapracticeadvisor.com. After this event, you're going to be presented with a post-event survey evaluation form. We hope you'll take a moment to answer those questions so that we can continue to improve our webinar series. You'll be able also to see a recap of this webinar, an archived version of this webinar on our site later today at cpapracticeadvisor.com/webinars. Thank you all so much, and our audio will end now.